What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the content that I watch on the WWE Network as well as on Vice, as today we're talking the latest episode from Dark Side of the Ring, Season 1, Episode 4, entitled The Last of the Von Erichs. So I say latest, that's not exactly accurate. This actually aired a year ago. The latest would be the Benoit episode that aired this past week on Tuesday. I'm just catching up. This is my latest review of Dark Side of the Ring, I guess I meant to say. But yeah, if you haven't already, check out my other reviews covering the Bruiser Brody episode, the Match Made in Heaven episode, what was the second episode? Oh, the Montreal Screwjob, of course. And we're talking today of the last of the Von Erichs. Then in the remainder of Season 1, we have to talk about the mysterious death of Gorgeous Gino, as well as the Fabulous Moolah, which were also very good episodes. This one is depressing as fuck. If you were already sad, I would probably not recommend watching this episode. I mean, you are just going to become depressed. You got to find the right time to watch this one. Anyone who's a wrestling fan knows of the Von Erichs and the curse, which isn't exactly a curse, as the remaining Von Erich, says, Kevin Von Erich. It's not a curse. His sons are kind of living up to the legacy and forging their own path to superstardom right now in MLW. I actually interviewed them about this and about other stuff regarding MLW about a year ago for Wrestle Rant Radio and a separate article for Daily DDT. Ross and Marshall, who were very, very cool. I had to do the interview at like 4 p.m. Eastern time because they live over in Hawaii, which they talk about here, and where they live with their dad, and it was like 8 or 9 a.m. over there, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, this was a great episode. For anyone who's not a wrestling fan, first of all, these shows are great to show non-wrestling fans. It doesn't exactly put wrestling in the greatest light, mind you, but it's still fascinating nonetheless. There are documentaries that you can watch with pretty much anyone, and they're bound to be, they're bound to enjoy them, or at the very least, be captivated by them. So to kick off the episode here, they discuss the family hierarchy, and they talk about Fritz Von Erich, who is the dad of the Von Erich brothers, and how he invented the claw. They later brought in another Von Erich who wasn't a Von Erich, whose name escapes me right now. I didn't take notes while watching this. I'm kind of going off of memory here, so excuse me if I miss anything. But they brought in a Von Erich who wasn't a Von Erich to be a Von Erich, and he couldn't cut it to be Von Erich, so they kicked him out of the Von Erichs because the fans weren't fucking buying it. Kevin Von Erich is the last remaining Von Erich today, and he's the one who kind of retells the whole story about all of his brothers and how they passed and whatnot. He lives in Hawaii now. He actually had his last match in 2017 with his two sons, Ross and Marshall, in Israel, which again they talked about in the interview that I conducted with them. Cheap plug, check it out if you haven't already. I'll probably upload that here to the channel at some point. But yeah, so he's been retired for a few years now lives in Hawaii. Jack Von Erich, I think one of the younger ones, died as a kid after drowning in a pool following a freak electrical accident. How crazy is that? Like, that alone is traumatizing enough, let alone what happened to everyone else. So Jack didn't even have a chance to get involved in wrestling. He was very, very young and drowned. So that absolutely sucks, and that's very unfortunate. But that's just the beginning of it. That's just the tip of the iceberg here with the Von Erich family. So they talk about David Von Erich. He was over in Japan doing some wrestling over there. I guess he was already depressed. He was, huge into the drugs and stuff like that. I guess the original cause of death, as they believed, was that he overdosed. That was the rumor that he died of a drug overdose. I think the official cause of death was that he had complications of like gastritinis or something along those lines. In Bruiser Brody, there was a rumor that he actually may have hid the drugs when he went in the hotel room and he discovered the body. And, he kind of covered for David. But David had some issues. He died in that hotel room. That's another thing that really devastated the family. Mike tried to kind of replace his brother, and he too had issues. So he kind of tried to fill in for his brother. He got depressed, committed suicide by overdose in his car. Fucking terrible. Chris, who was kind of seen as the happier one, wasn't really made for wrestling. He had some physical disabilities, and he was a very happy child, but he had some issues where he couldn't really go in the ring. They allowed him to wrestle. He did do some matches, but he got hurt very easily because the guy's body wasn't made to wrestle. And his heart was into it, but his body, unfortunately, was not. He, too, committed suicide via a gunshot. He wrote a suicide note. I think Kevin read this. He went out, went downstairs, talked to someone about it. They're like, oh, do they usually write suicide notes? They said no. He runs back upstairs. He barely missed it right before he pulled the trigger. And he shot himself, I believe, right through the head. It was fucking terrible. Again, this is absolutely awful. Then there's Kerry Von Erich, who was kind of seen as like one of the bigger stars, if not the biggest star of the entire family. He beat Ric Flair at David's tribute show for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, left WCCW for WWF, became the Texas Tornado. So this is where the WWF kind of comes into play here. I think he might have been the only brother to get involved with WWE. He won the Intercontinental Championship. He was kind of successful. The issue is that, I forgot to mention this, but Fritz Von Erich invented the claw. They all used it. He wasn't allowed to use the claw. They didn't even call him Kerry Von Erich. They called him the Texas Tornado. They made no mention of his family legacy, which is what brought him to the dance in the first place. That's like calling Charlotte, I don't know, Charlotte, I don't even know. They called her Charlotte for a while, mind you, but they never ignored the fact that she was Ric Flair's daughter. They did not shy away from that. That would be completely stupid, and it was dumb for them to do the same thing here. So it didn't really take off. And then another thing was that even after he got involved in WWE, his matches weren't what they should have been because he had reduced athletic abilities because the guy amputated, I believe, his leg in a car accident. And he had to, have a fake leg inserted or something like that. So he started relying heavily on drugs, had a very bad motorcycle accident, but they wanted to keep it quiet so he could still get hired in WWE and do well. But he just wasn't the same. So he relied on the drugs, and that's really what got the better of him. He too committed suicide. Actually, he may have been the one who may have shot himself through the head and not Chris. But he was definitely, it was still a terrible death nonetheless. And that was less than 10 years after David's death. How fucking sad is that? We hear from Jim Cornette a lot on this episode. We hear from Dave Meltzer. We actually see his office, which looks like a fucking shit show. The guy's got to clean up and get organized. It looks terrible in there. We hear from, obviously, Kevin Von Erich. Dutch Mantel once again narrates. Thankfully, it ends on a happy note. We hear, Kevin is doing very well right now in Hawaii, watching his sons train and wrestle for MLW now. That actually happened well after this was filmed, but it's cool to hear from them very briefly, and he's very happy to have his family surrounding him. He's a proud grandfather. They're all living in Hawaii right now. The only thing I thought was kind of weird about this episode, the whole episode was devastating to watch. Unless I missed it, which I very well may have. I don't think they talked about this, though. There's also Lacey Von Erich, who was another one. I think she may have been the sister of Ross and Marshall. She started wrestling 10 years ago, a long time ago. I don't know, maybe she's the cousin. She was definitely Von Erich. It was Lacey Von Erich. She got signed by TNA in 2008, 2009. She was a part of the Beautiful People. She was completely terrible, though. She absolutely sucked. She was absolutely awful. I don't even think she made it to 2010. She was gone soon after, and she never really worked out. I don't think they made any mention of her here, though. I know she's obviously not as notable as the five or six brothers, but still, I think it would have been worth mentioning, that she tried out wrestling. She worked for TNA. They actually did a one-off in TNA back, I think, in 2014 on Father's Day in Texas, which is kind of cool. I think it's available on YouTube if you want to watch it. Another thing, too, I forgot to mention was that the dad actually, the wife, I think they kind of got set. I think they got divorced because the wife could not take all these deaths. Like, she couldn't wrap her head around it. It was crazy, and I don't blame her at all. The dad was kind of pissed about it. Like, he pointed a gun right at Kevin, and it was like this whole crazy thing. Like, he was kind of blaming Kevin for it, and he's like, oh, if you're going to kill yourself, go kill yourself, blah, blah, blah. Really crazy. He ended up dying, I think, due to cancer not long after. Kevin almost actually committed suicide too, or at least be put in prison. He was very unhappy. They told the story, and I'll end on this, even though it's not really the happiest note, but it kind of is. So he was super depressed. After everything that happened, he thought to himself, what's the best way to be put in prison if I live in Texas? Oh, I know. Steal a gun, because they take that shit really seriously. So he went to a gun store, took a gun, and no one said anything. The people that worked there just stared at him. And he's like, are you going to say anything? I'm taking this gun. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? And the guy who worked there looked at him and said, I love you, Kevin. And that fucking hit him hard. So he got in the car, and I don't know if he was going to shoot himself or what, but he went back and put the gun back, and he's like, I'm sorry, I apologize, I shouldn't have done that. And that was really the turning point for him that made him realize, listen, I should not follow in the footsteps of my brothers. I have a bright future ahead of me. I can't do that, all this other stuff. So it was a really heavy, very heavy documentary. You really got to prepare yourself mentally to watch this one. It's crazy. Very good documentary, though. It's a great one. So check it out right now. It's available on YouTube as well as on Vice or Viceland.com. I forgot what exactly it is. But all the Season 1 episodes are available in full on that website. And be sure to check out the Benoit episode as well, which I will be reviewing at some point, down the road after I'm finished reviewing Season 1. And that's it, guys. So thank you for checking out this episode. I hate to end it on that note, but that was the Von Erich story in a nutshell. So hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did to a certain extent. I don't really want to see people killing themselves, but the way that it was shot and the way that it was done, I thought was great. But that's going to do it for this episode. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. And we'll be back soon with more Dark Side of the Ring reviews. Until then, guys, have a great one. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.